so we're at the boat ramp. We made the roughly 10-minute trip from the dealership to the boat ramp safely. And one of the things I forgot to mention was actually checking the trailer lights before you depart, which we did do. But the easiest way to check trailer lights is actually to turn on your running lights and turn on your emergency flashers. That will check the running lights, the brake lights, and the blinkers all in one. So you can see we've got our blinker on, the running light is on, and so are the side marker lights. And again, if you're having trouble with lights, which is common, a lot of times it's just the metal on the connector needs to be shined up with a blade, or it could be the fuse, or it could be the ground on the trailer, but those are just some common things. So now we're gonna start our pre-launch checklist. So we're at the ramp, we're ready to back down, but there's quite a few things we wanna do to make sure that everything goes smoothly. One of the most important things for new boaters is what I try to tell our customers is, hey, look, if you're new to boating, and even if you're new to the boat that you currently own, it's a good idea not to go on a busy summer Saturday morning for your very first maiden voyage. The boat ramps are busy. There's a lot of people going in and out, and you really want to take your time. It is practice. So, go on a weekday when it's not as busy if you are new to the boat or new to boating. But first thing we need to do, and this is probably the most important, is to put in the drain plug. So I'm going to crouch down here, and we've got our drain plug that's just sitting loose in the bottom of the boat. And the drain plug is now in. So the drain plug is in there. Sometimes, because I deal with a lot of new boats, I'll actually back the boat down on the incline before I put the plug in. It's a little bit risky, but I like to have the hull empty of water before I put the plug in, because that way when I do go to pull the boat out of the water, it's a little bit easier for me to know if I'm getting water in the hull, maybe through a hull leak, which can happen sometimes on new boats and even used ones. Typically, if you are getting water in the hull, it's usually because of the motor well when you're retrieving, but I just like to have the hull empty of water. The next step is going to be your tie-down straps. So if you've got tie-down straps, you're going to release those. And this boat has these convenient boat buckles, so we'll take both of them off. And then, of course, once again, I'm just checking the engine to make sure it's up high enough so that when I back down, that motor's not going to drag. Okay, another step before launching is to, again, double check the bow strap and the safety chain. I personally don't like backing down a boat ramp without the strap and chain being on. So my policy is, when I back down the ramp, the bow strap and chain are left on until I get to the point where the stern of the boat is more or less over water, at least close enough to it so that if the boat did slide off, it would fall into water instead of onto the hard. I had an episode that I'll never forget at this very ramp, and there was a new boat buyer that had pulled up next to me, and the gentleman had a very large cabin cruiser boat, and the trailer it was a roller trailer, and that particular customer wasn't used to having a roller trailer, and his policy apparently was to undo the strap and safety chain prior to backing down. And I've got a friend that does that also. Well, because he had undone the strap and chain ahead of time, as soon as he backed down the ramp, the boat rolled off the trailer and did all kinds of damage. So it's just best just to leave these connected until you get back down the ramp. The next step there is going to be getting ready with fenders and dock lines. So if you're launching the boat by yourself, or you're not going to simply drive away with the boat or have someone drive away with the boat, it's a good idea to have your dock lines and fenders already connected. And I like to kind of figure out which way is the wind going to push the boat, and that's typically the side that I'll choose to either put fenders on if I want the wind to push the boat against the dock, or if I want the wind to push the boat away from the dock, then I'll make that decision at the time. So in this case, the wind is more or less coming out of the north, so I've got the fenders and dock lines on the north side of the boat. That way when it drops down and I go to park, the wind will be holding the boat off of the finger dock. At least that's the plan. So at this point, we're now ready to back down. As I'm backing the boat down, actually, whenever I'm backing up on with a trailer, I have a policy that I always have my driver, at least my driver's side window down. It's a good idea to have both windows down. And my feeling is that if I'm backing the trailer up and someone's trying to yell at me to get my attention because I'm about to hit something, or heaven forbid, some little kid or something ran out behind the boat or whatever, I want to be able to hear what people are telling me. So when you're backing up a boat, always have your windows down so you can hear what's going on around you. It's just a good idea. Let's back it on down. So we're on the incline at this point. The boat is more or less close enough to the water so I can undo the chain and the strap. Before I got out of the truck, I put my emergency brake on, and I also leave the door open. And my feeling is that if I need to run back into the truck because of a parking failure or brake release, I can jump back into the truck. Generally speaking, it's not the best idea to leave the cab of the truck. You're better off to have your helper undo the safety chain and strap while you stay in the vehicle if you're the driver. That's just good policy, but it doesn't always work out that way. I've even had the old timers tell me that before they get the truck on the incline, they'll take out a big block of wood and put it behind the rear wheels just as one more sort of point of safety. It is important to make sure you have good emergency brakes. We've had an episode one time where the vehicle was in park, but the emergency brake in the tow vehicle wasn't fully tight, and believe it or not, it was an older vehicle, and it jumped from park to reverse, and the truck literally backed down. So that's one of the reasons I leave the door open and the window down. Just gives me that much more of a chance to jump back into the cab when I'm doing something like this. But at this point, we've got Kara on the finger dock. She's going to be grabbing the bow line and the stern line. We've got our fenders out, and we're now ready to just sort of, easily glide the boat off. Go ahead and grab that stern line. And here's this one. And because the wind has a northern component to it, as the boat comes off, it's more or less going to stay away from the finger dock. But I always tell people, if you're on the edge of the finger dock and you're wearing good shoes, tennis shoes, you can sort of leave your toes, if the boat's not real big like this one, you can leave your toes over the edge, and that'll also help keep the boat from rubbing up against the dock. Now this one has a nice rubber edging to it, but don't trust them because they're notorious for either the rubber being missing or damaged or torn, or worse yet, one of the fastening nails is sticking out. And so I always kind of keep an eye on that, especially when if there's a chance the boat's going to rub up against the finger dock. But this one looks like it's in pretty good shape, and we do have our fenders just in case, so we'll back it down. When we're backing down, what's going to happen is Kara, who by the way has a bunch of trailering experience, but she just happens to be helping with the boat part of it. Kara's just going to walk down the finger dock with the lines in her hand as I'm backing down slowly. What I've noticed at boat ramps, by the way, is that a lot of times parents that have small children, it's just a lot going on, and there's always seems to be kids running around. So you got to be super careful about that when you're launching. Just make sure that other people's kids are not in your way. The last thing is, when we back the boat down, I've seen a lot of times when, the people backing down just go so fast that the boat jettisons off, and then the poor person trying to hold the boat, is doing all they can to wrangle the boat in, and that can lead to damage because, when you're trying to pull that boat, you're pulling it back against the dock, and it can be a problem. So what we do is we back it down, get the rear of the boat floating, make sure everything's kind of stable, and then we'll finish backing it down the rest of the way, and the boat more or less will float off without getting jettisoned. At least that's the idea. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so we're in the slip here, and one thing I wanted to mention that I have found very helpful over the years is to let the cleats do the work, or as much of the work as possible. So one of the things, if I want to pull this boat closer to me, let me just get it out there a little bit. If I want to pull this boat closer to me, instead of just trying to direct pull it, especially if I'm going against the wind, it's so much easier if you just take the cleat, if you have the benefit of a cleat nearby, and just pull against the cleat. I've got one here in the back around the cleat, and I've got one here. And what that does, you get a mechanical advantage just using the cleat to pull the boat over. And if I want to, I can put my foot out there and just sort of break it a little bit. And what I can do is show you real quick on cleating. Common mistake that I see is people don't know how to cleat very often. So just a little bonus here. I was taught by a guy, it's actually one of our first technicians, how to properly cleat. And what you do, you go around the base of the cleat one time. You may want to come in a little closer. So you come in, you go around the cleat one time, do your crisscross, and what a lot of people will now do is they'll just go and keep crisscrossing and just go around and do all kinds of loop-de-loos and whatnot. But in fact, that's not the best idea, because if you need to untie this boat in a hurry and you've got to deal with all that, it's just not the greatest thing. So once you've got your two crisscrosses, I went around the base one time, I do my crisscross. What you want to do is remember 2 under 1. Usually what'll happen is somebody will put this final twist where you loop the line underneath the other, and they'll do it in the wrong orientation, and they won't get what's called 2 under 1. And so your line is always going to be loose. But if instead you'll take, and instead of placing the loop in this direction, I instead place the loop in this direction, where the line going underneath is running the same direction as the line next to it. Then I have what's called 2 under 1. And at this point, when I just pull that like that, it becomes a clamp. And that is not going to come loose. That's called 2 under 1. You know, if you're worried, you can maybe go around one more time, but that's it. That's all you need to do. So let's take a look. We're ready now for Kara to back the boat down. I'm going to uncleat and get the boat out of the slip. All right, so Kara's going to back the trailer down, and the general rule of thumb as I push the boat out of the slip is for the trailer fenders to just barely be underwater. Now every boat ramp is different based on the incline, the length of the boat, length of the trailer. But a good starting point is to just barely put the fenders underwater. That's a good rule of thumb. And so she's pretty much there. And at that point, the trailer is deep enough where we could drive the boat onto the trailer. I'm not going to drive it on, I'm just going to float the boat on. So once we get the boat more or less positioned over the trailer, she'll probably have to come back just a little bit. That's good, right about there. When you are coming into the slip, a real common thing is there's a crosswind, and you want to plan for that crosswind. So as you're driving the boat onto the trailer, if you're going to drive it on, think about which way the wind is going to push you, and you're going to want to counteract that as you are bringing the boat in. And sometimes what I'll do before I come and bring the boat all the way up, if I'm driving it, is I'll have somebody, if I'm driving the boat up onto the trailer, I'll have somebody at the front who's kind of telling me which way to point the bow, because obviously I want to have it more or less centered. So here we go. We're just floating the boat on. With this being a relatively small boat, I can actually just hand crank it the rest of the way. Another safety point is another real common mistake. I know probably most of you know about this, but the boat ramps typically are slippery, and it really hurts when you fall. I know this from experience. So if it's low tide in particular, and you step on that green slime, you might be in for a rude awakening when you're on your tail. But so be careful on that. In this case, what I'll do is pull it up the rest of the way as much as I can. If I'm driving the boat, I can power load it and just kind of push it up the rest of the way and then put my strap on. But in this case, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way, like my dad used to do whenever we would go to the boat ramp and launch and get about 5 minutes of boating in before the motor failed. We're going to do it old school here. I'm just going to climb up here. I'm going to be very careful about wet feet. And we'll just get it on there the old-fashioned way. Put the clicker on. Now, woo! That trailer strap and the handle is under load. If that clicker fails, the handle will swing around and smack you right in the wrist, and it's not going to feel great. So make sure that clicker is in good shape. If it isn't, replace the winch. But generally speaking, try to keep clear of that handle when you do let go. Some winches have 2 speeds. Usually that involves removing the winch handle through a little quick disconnect and putting it on the other gear. So you have a high and a low gear. At this point, I put the chain on. Make sure the motor is up. So prior to pulling the boat out, I may have had a few beers that day. If I have, slow down. Really think about it. Very first boat I ever owned, I pulled it out, had the motor all the way down and trailered it all the way home with the skeg dragging the pavement. So when I got home, I had about that much skeg missing. That's not a good idea, especially when you go to back up into the driveway. Anyway, another thing that I like to point out is the boat that we had here today was generally pretty easy. It's a 24-foot boat. It's relatively lightweight with it being a bay boat. When the boat becomes larger and longer, there are some other steps. I'll try to explain them briefly. First of all, if the boat has a windlass with an anchor that is integrated into the bow, there's a good chance that when you go to launch, that anchor is going to catch on the winch stand. If the winch stand is not a 2-piece, where the winch is further up. If that's the case, what I tend to do, I always think of the longer boats as a 2-step process. Step 1 is I back the boat to where the front of it is, where the back of the boat is more or less floating, but there's still enough weight on the trailer where I can just tap on the brakes and let that boat slide back about 6 inches, okay? And then at that point I can float it off, because as the trailer gets down the incline and the boat is still level with the water, the bow, particularly integrated anchors, is going to want to grab onto that winch stand or even the bow stop or bow roller. So with this method of being a 2-step, back down, tap on the brakes, let that boat slide off, slide back just a little bit, and then float it off. When you do that, be careful, because I had one case where I went and did that and I was in a hurry and hit the brakes a little bit too hard and off-floated my boat. And that was a bad thing. Never want to do that. Like I said, I've made all the mistakes. On the longer boats, when you are retrieving them, and again, every boat ramp is different. The steeper boat ramps are a little tougher in this regard. What we do is we have a 2-step process. So step 1 on retrieve of long boats, the very first step, is we submerge the trailer very, very deep, particularly if it's a deep V hull. If it's a deep V hull, I've had cases where the knife edge will actually ride on the cross member of the trailer, and it can do gel coat damage. So I like to get that trailer real deep and float the boat on, or just, you know, power it on real real carefully. When you do that, the trouble is your trailer's way down here, your boat's like this, so part of step one, you connect the strap and winch it and get it as tight as you can. But now when you pull away, the boat's going to pull back from the bow roller or from the bow stop. Okay, so, and that is frustrating because the boat has to be right next to the bow roller. It has to be resting on the bow roller. That's what gives the trailer and the boat its structural rigidity, so that when you're going down the road, you're not getting a ton of bounce. Okay, if you're going down the road and you're getting a bunch of bounce, it could be because the bow of the boat is not resting on the bow roller and tight to the strap. And it's very annoying when you get all that bounce. I think you know what I'm talking about. So therefore we have step two. On the longer boats, we roll forward about 4 feet, give or take. Now, as I roll forward, I've already got the bow of the boat nice and tight to the roller, but as I roll forward, the trailer and the boat are going to be more parallel. So the boat's going to pull away from the roller. When that happens, the next step is then for you to power load it those last roughly 6 inches or so, and your helper is going to strap it tight. And that should get you to where you're not getting the bounce when you're going down the highway, because at that point that boat will be nice and tight to the trailer. As always, on the retrieve, if the trailer is too deep, there can be damage because your bow rub rail is going to try to crash into the winch. So if that happens, you're in too deep. So those are just a few pointers. At this point, we're now ready for Kara to pull forward. We've got the strap, the chain, the motor up. During the rollout process, go slowly. If you need 4-wheel drive and your truck has 4-wheel drive, put it in 4-wheel drive. But the key here is to pull forward slowly. Watch, she's going to do it now. Going slow allows the boat to center itself. So we're not quite done yet. We're now ready to get ready for trailering, and it's real common to leave dock lines and fenders out. So we're going to take off the dock lines and fenders. We're going to check over the boat for any loose gear. We're going to make sure that the plug is out. We're going to make sure that the antenna's down, the outriggers are down, that the motor's trimmed up, that we're ready to go. I'll take the the bow line off, and I've looked into the boat to make sure that there's nothing loose. We have a certain boat model, and the boat builder requires that the windshield, it's a sliding windshield, is in the down position. Otherwise, it can actually become damaged during a high-speed trailering. So, you know, all of those sort of safety checks. There's one thing I'm noticing right now that I'm going to correct, and that is that this flip-up seat right here, lo and behold, the little latch wasn't closed. So I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to make sure that those are latched. So these are the things that are real common. Unsecured coolers can blow out. I'm going to go around to the back and redo the transom straps and remove the drain plug. So the transom strap there is secured. We've got one more over here. And then the all-important drain plug. I like to have the drain plug out whenever the boat's not in the water. So I should see a minimal amount of water coming out of there. If there's more than a minimal amount of water, the question is why. Also, Leaving the drain plug out when the boat is not in water prevents rainwater from collecting in the bilge and creating what we call a yard sunk boat. All right, I got my motor trimmed up, straps are on, plugs out, VHF antennas down, outriggers are down, everything's secured in the boat. We are now ready to trailer. All right, so we made it back to the dealership safely with the boat and the truck. And if my son were the one using the boat for the day, the first step would be to go inspect it for damage and see what all he broke. But we didn't have that today, so don't have to worry about what my son did to the boat. And that was a joke, by the way. But a couple things just to talk about in terms of safe trailering that we didn't cover. One of them, in conclusion, is if your tow vehicle is equipped with tow haul mode or has overdrive, you'll want to put the vehicle in tow haul mode. If you have overdrive, it's generally not, you don't want to have the overdrive setting. So if you've got that, setting in your car or your SUV, you'll want to bypass that. Check the owner's manual and it'll explain what they recommend for towing. The other thing is just in terms of safe trailering, the best thing that can be done is to leave a lot of stopping distance between you and the vehicle in front of you. I know it sounds obvious, but there's a lot more weight going on. And even if the trailer has brakes, it's not providing the full braking power that the vehicle needs. So generally speaking, you just want to leave a lot of stopping distance, plan for extra time. If you're on the highway, you really don't want to be going, really over the speed limit in my experience. It's really hard on the rear end of the tow vehicle, believe it or not, all that extra weight. And those can, I've had a tow vehicle where that rear end got damaged because the driver was towing too fast. So just a few things there, but the main one is extra stopping distance. Really, you should at least have double what you normally would have if you weren't towing. And then when we get back to the house, you're going to want to enlist the help of your spouse to do all the cleanup. So in this case, the joke was we were going to have Kara do it, but that probably would generate some negative comments. And since my wife's not here, I'm going to have to do it myself, unfortunately. So what we're going to do, we're going to rinse the whole boat off from top to bottom, top to bottom, front to back. I like to rinse everything. And when you're rinsing the trailer, guys and girls, what you're going to want to do is you really got to get the trailer extra good. Not only are you going to want to rinse off the wheels from the outside and get the brakes and everything, but what I like to do, I like to have one of those jet tips on the hose, and I'll actually go and get underneath and spray across to the other side and get the brakes and the axles and the whole underside of the trailer from the opposite side. So not only will I kind of get the wheels and the brakes from the outside, but I'll also shoot across. And the last thing I'll say on that is, usually if you're using the boat in salt water, of course, we're talking about rinsing. If you're not using it in salt water, you probably don't need to rinse it. But what I've noticed is salt tends to crystallize. If it was a really windy day especially, you'll get salt crystals all over the boat. So the first time you rinse the boat, it may not get all the salt off. It takes usually 2 passes. The first time gets all the salt crystals to sort of re-emulsify, and then the second time is when the salt will get literally rinsed off. And then of course, don't forget to rinse the motor. Follow the owner's manual on how to rinse the engine. So that's just a little bit about safe trailering. We've covered a lot. I'm sure if you have questions, we can answer them. You can reach out to me directly. My email is paul@boatersexchange.com, all spelled out. So paul@boatersexchange.com if you want to email me directly, or you can leave something in the comments. We'll try to answer them. Other than that, Boaters Exchange, your one-stop boating center. We're here in Rockledge and New Smyrna Beach. We'd love to help you with your new boat, your used boat, servicing your boat, welding, detailing. We really do it all here. So thank you so much for tuning in.